Final Fantasy Adventure is my favorite of Square's offerings on the Game Boy, and by extension it's my favorite original RPG for the system outside of maybe Pokemon, which came out like 5 or 6 years later. I think this is kind of a revolutionary game. I think it's really forward-thinking and modern for what it is. This game came out at about the same time as Final Fantasy IV. Literally, like a month before Final Fantasy IV came out, this game came out. And I think both of those games share a lot of the same vision for what the future of RPGs might look like, and accurately, as it turns out. Because from Final Fantasy Adventure and Final Fantasy IV onward, Japanese RPGs lost a lot more of their connection with Western RPGs. Games like Dragon Quest and Shin Megami Tensei all are like Phantasy Star are still very rooted in like the Ultima tradition. Games where you wander around a big ass world and kind of piece together this global system, this global political situation, and then wander through dungeons and whatnot. Final Fantasy IV and Adventure, and 3 to a lesser extent, kind of have a different vision. They are very momentum-focused stories. They want to kind of drag you along and keep you moving, and they have a much more intensity to them by being much more linear, basically. And while there are a lot of games, I really, really love and respect the Dragon Quest tradition. When it's done well, the Final Fantasy Adventure and 4 tradition, but really to a greater extent 4. I really like Adventure, but Final Fantasy 4 is one of my favorite games ever. That tradition has just resulted in some of my favorite games just ever. I think Chrono Trigger follows in that, Final Fantasy 6 and 7 and whatnot follow in that. Most of the Final Fantasies. And then that goes all the way up in today. Like games like Undertale, I think, are following the tradition of games like Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy Adventure. So while I deeply respect the Dragon Quest tradition, I really love these dramatic, linear, shorter stories, like games that want to tell you this story and have it have something important to tell. Like you can even see the difference between like Phantasy Star 2 and Phantasy Star 4, where the latter came out after games like Final Fantasy 4 and 6 and whatnot. So basically, there's a lot of things I think make this game special in comparison to other games that follow in its tradition. Namely Secret of Mana, which I kind of hate. There's a number of things that make this game just really sharp in comparison. Because really all it is that the fighting feels good in this game. It's an action RPG on the Game Boy. I love Saga 1 and 2 on the Game Boy, but they don't have the same just kind of functionality and good feeling fighting that this game has. And Secret of Mana doesn't have that. It has this really limp, weird, mushy combat system where most of the hits don't really seem to register, and it's mostly based around everyone pausing the game and using magic, and it's kind of unplayable unless you have another friend with you. And then this game just feels like Legend of Zelda. That's all I really want out of the action RPG, is just feel as good as a Zelda game. And these Final Fantasy Adventure manages that, where Secret of Mana doesn't. And you can see just that. While this story is obviously pretty poorly translated, or at least localized, it still moves in a really effective way. Like we already know where the Mana Tree is. We already been introduced to our two villains. We already had a bit of melodrama with Billy, which this game is full of melodrama. That's another thing it shares in common with Final Fantasy IV, is just loading on the melodrama. And we got a main theme, which I hadn't played this game in years, but I can still call this main theme to my head. couple days ago, and that seemed to be like a good sign that it was a good pick. Because this is a really cool, spunky little 1991 action RPG, and it's really good and functional. There's a couple things about it that are a little awkward. I think it's possible to get stuck because you can get trapped without keys, which you can avoid if you're careful. And there's one puzzle in the game later where you have to walk in a circle 8 around palm trees, and I got stuck on that on my replay of the game because I couldn't remember how to do it, even though I basically knew, even though I looked it up the last time I played. And that's nonsense, but outside of that, I think this game is really sharp. Just for a variety of reasons. I think Final Fantasy Adventure values functionality over pretense, and I think that's what differentiates it from Secret of Mana. That everything here is just designed to work, and fits together naturally. Like, Secret of Mana has the pretense of a big open world, but in this game you actually have a full world that fits together screen by screen, just like, you know, Link's Awakening or whatnot. Whereas Secret of Mana, it's all segmented up and kind of ugly. There's no ring menu, there's not 48 magic spells, you just have 8 spells that you learn over the course of the game. And that's all you need in a game like this. The AI partners are completely unobtrusive, which is good for this game at least. And I just really value that. I really value that everything in this game just works. Whereas just moving forward in Mana just feels like just trying to claw my way through this unpleasant mess of systems. And I just don't enjoy it at all. It just feels like pulling teeth to me. And another thing is that this game is really short. It's 5 or 6 hours long, maybe. And that's so valuable. Because, yeah, if you stretched out this story is kind of thin, but it really works well for the kind of game that this is. Whereas, like, if you stretched out to 20 hours, it would get really boring. Like, get another game. So there's a whole bunch of this stuff that makes this game really playable to me. And I just really like the way it's paced, because it's all linear until the end. You actually get an ability to you get a chocobo that lets you race around the whole world and race around water, and then you wander around the world, and it turns out you've been to basically every place on the world. It's just that because they all fit together, you've been linearly going through contextualized linear story beats have led you around this whole world, and then at the very end you get to see how it all fits together, and it's really just a nice moment, and I find it very satisfying. And the whole game is just kind of full of nice moments, really. Like, there's a scene where you go to rescue the girl off of an airship, and it takes off, and you wind up exploring this airship in midair and sneaking out and leaping off to safety. There's a scene where a tower falls down and you're thrown to safety by a robot friend, and then he dies, saving you. There's a lot of characters you meet and then they die. That's another thing. That's definitely a thing it shares in common with MF4. It's just lots and lots of melodrama. Like, here we go. Here's another character dying. And that's really okay, because like I said, the game's really short, and the simplistic narrative just functions for the game really nicely, because it has a nice little ending that's kind of melancholic, which I've seen the other Mana games go for, and it just doesn't really work for me as well, because it's at the end of these really drawn-out experiences. And Final Fantasy Adventure doesn't have any magic rocks to collect. You're not visiting 8 different magic doodads. That's the one thing it actually kind of has over Link's Awakening, is just it's really honestly kind of paced like Half-Life. You're moving through meeting different people, And the areas have like branches and whatnot. They're not just complete straight shots. That would be pretty dull. But they're much more constrained than something like Link's Awakening. But as a result, the story can just move. Just the whole game, it's just moving. You know, it feels real good. And you can see these different areas that you'll get to later. They're already showing you how everything will eventually just start fitting together. And there's just so many little things I like about how this game just feels very sensibly assembled, in a way that not a lot of RPGs really do. And like, I love the first two Saga games on the Game Boy, but they're a different breed. It's a different breed of affection, because those games are like weird, strange, arty things that you kind of have to struggle with. Forgot how to use the candy here for a second. Whereas this is just the most kind of natural thing in the world. It's an action RPG with a story that's semi-affecting, and combat that feels good, and really great music. I think Kenji Ito did the music just like he did for Saga 2, and which is my other favorite Square game on the Game Boy. And yeah, it just feels so well put together, and I always take offense when I'm reminded that Sword of Mana exists, because it's just something that's designed to take this game and bolt on a bunch of the bullshit from the sequel. And that's not what's special about this game. This game is special because of its lack of pretense, its lack of ring menus and a billion magic spells and whatnot. It doesn't need multiplayer, it doesn't need any of that. It's just a straightforward little story, and I really appreciate that about it. Even if there are some awkward puzzles and it's possible to get stuck, like I kind of do at the end of this video. But like, I'm kind of setting myself up to get stuck here because I'm very low HP. But that's a part of the charm that is lost moving to games like Pokemon and whatnot, is that there are levels of intensity to this that aren't present in later RPGs, because of it is a little older and has moments like that where you actually need to plan ahead and make sure you have some healing items, or else you're gonna have a bad time. So yeah, I love this game for its economy of design. I love it for its brevity, its momentum, the fact that the combat actually feels good. For the melodrama, there's one where a lady turns into a monster, and and it's really silly, but it works. It works, and it's in the silliness. It carries itself very well through all that. I like it because it's short. That is just such an RPG thing, is just to be short and replayable and fun. And I like that it's just completely unpretentious. I really love this game. I'm really glad it exists in the form that it does, because it's really just perfect as it is. It doesn't really need anything else. Nope, no secrets there. And, oh yeah, Madoc. That uses up the Madoc. I think we get a weapon later on that lets us do that. But yeah, I really like Final Fantasy Adventure. Y'all should give it a shot.